Welcome again, everybody, to Secret Service. I am Dave Murray, your host from the DeJulius Group. I am the senior consultant, and I am so glad to have you join us today because I have a really special guest today. Today, we are joined by Captain Charlie Plumb. Charlie flew 74 successful missions during the Vietnam War, was shot down on his 75th, parachuted out, and was taken prisoner with only 5 days remaining in his tour of duty. Charlie spent almost 6 years as a POW. A little background on Charlie, besides that, he helped start the Naval Top Gun School, you all remember from the movie, and is considered to be one of the original Top Gun pilots. He is the author of the autobiography, I'm No Hero. And here's something that's really cool. In 2010, he was named to the Speaker Hall of Fame. For those of you that aren't familiar with the world of public speaking, that's a pretty big deal. He has also spoken to over 5,000 audiences. Think about that for a minute. Not individuals, 5,000 audiences. That's a pretty big number. If his name does not ring a bell, you'll probably recognize his face because he's a contributor to cable news outlets on a regular basis. He's also appeared on Good Morning America, The News Hour with Jim Lehrer, and most recently he's been interviewed by Chris Cuomo, Anderson Cooper, and Glenn Beck. And last but certainly not least, he is the recipient of a Silver Star, Legion of Merit, a Bronze Star, 2 Purple Hearts, and the POW Medal of Honor. Charlie, it is an absolute honor to speak with you today, and thank you so much for joining us.
Dave, good to see you and good to be with you again.
Well, I gotta share with our audience that I am lucky enough to have seen you before, and actually about 4 or 5 times now. We share a client, and a lot of times we're in the building together. And whenever I am in the building with you, I make sure that I schedule some time in so I can see you present because I love to see it every single time I can.
Thank you, and I appreciate that. I think you probably deserve a medal yourself for sitting through my presentation so many times.
Oh, no, it is totally worth it. So here's the thing that that is hard about what I have to do especially when I'm interviewing you, right? Because you have such a great story. Your presentation is so unique and so motivational. So here I am. I have all these great questions I want to ask you because I know you and I've seen you present before, but at the same time, I don't want to ruin it for someone that is going to see you for the first time in September. So it's kind of a delicate balance. But I wanted to start with this. You speak to so many audiences and have inspired so many people across the globe. You must get some fantastic feedback. And I wanted to start with this question. Can you share a couple of stories that you heard from people that have seen you and some of the moving things that you've heard?
Really, one of the greatest advantages of this career and what I do is the feedback that I get, because you can speak to a large number of audiences, and probably 1.5 million people have heard my presentation in the last 43 years. But really, until somebody comes up and says something to me about what I have said to them, that goes right to my heart, and it makes it worthwhile in all the travel and all of the speaking that I do. A couple just come to mind. I spoke on Necker Island for Sir Richard Branson a couple of years ago. He had a seminar down there called Surviving and Thriving. And so he thought that I was a survivor and thriver and invited me to come down to speak. It was really, really interesting. It's a phenomenal place. And in the British Virgin Islands, his own little kingdom there. Well, and there were about 35 people in the audience. He was right on the front row. And after I spoke, he was the first one to raise his hand with a question. And he said, Charlie, I opposed the Vietnam War. I carried signs around. I was a peacenik. Was I wrong? Tough question to answer, Richard Branson, especially when I'm under his roof. I said, Richard, I have a brother 10 years younger than I am, and he was anti-war as well. When I came home, I was very angry at first. Maybe angry is probably not the right word. I was miffed at first. And so I grabbed him by the nape of the neck and said, what are you doing opposing the war that I was over there fighting? And he said, trying to bring you home. So that, and as I explained to Sir Richard Branson, it all depends on where your heart is. if your motivation is true and correct, if you're honest, if you have integrity, then I think it's right to say what you feel and express that. And of course that's what goes on in our nation. And one of the reasons I was in uniform to fight for our way of life is that we have the opportunity to dissent. You know, we can, you know, we have freedom of speech. We can say what we want to say. So another interesting response that just came to mind is I met the wife of one of the guys on 9/11 on one of the airplanes, and this was the fourth airplane that went out to Pennsylvania and crashed out there. And she came up to me, and this is a couple of years after 9/11. She said, "Do you know, my husband had heard you speak just a few months before that plane crash. And incidentally, he was one of the four guys that tried to attack the jihadists on that airplane." And he said, and she said to me, she said, I can't be sure, but he talked about your presentation a lot and the strength that you had to have in adversity. I'm convinced that he felt that same strength as he tried to save that airplane over Pennsylvania. So it's really kind of crazy that, you know, the response that I get from the audiences that I speak to.
Wow, two amazing stories. And so let's talk about that number for a second, because for me, that number is huge. And if people think about that for a second, 5,000 audiences, including Sir Richard Branson. What do you think? Do you have a ballpark idea of how many people you have actually spoken to over the years?
It's sort of hard to come up with that figure, but I think maybe 1 million to 1.5 million.
Wow, that's incredible.
And some of them, like you, more than once.
I am proudly in that.
Can I count you 4 times, David?
Absolutely.
All right.
So here's a question that may be difficult for you to think about, but it's something that I've wondered often after hearing you speak. And you kind of allude to it a little bit too during your talk. But you know, that time that you spent in captivity must have been so difficult, and so many hardships and so many things going through your head. But now that you're removed from that, I have to think that there's probably a few things you think back upon fondly from your time.
No question.
Hear what those are.
Absolutely. There's no question that 6 years, you know, the 6 years of my life that I gave up actually had great advantage. And of course, this is one of the messages that I will bring to the Secret Service Summit in September, is that within every adversity in life, there's opportunity. You know, there's a joy, even in the bad times. And I look back at that 6 years as being a training ground, a maturing process for me. And some of the men that I met over there in those prison camps turned out to be my lifelong buddies. I mean, they're closer to me than my own brothers, because they feel that I helped save their life, and I know they helped save mine. And so many instances during that 6 years of pain were joyful to me. We celebrated things. We tried to come up with ways to smile and ways to laugh. We passed around patriotic quotes and Bible verses and jokes and stories about our lives. And so if you were to come to one of our conventions, we have a POW convention every 2 years. Get together, talk about the good old days. and if you were at one of those conventions, you would hear nothing but upbeat, positive, humorous, joyful noise at these conventions, because we all slap each other on the back, and we remember that, you know, the guard we called Babyface came in and tried to push us around, and we find humor in some of those dark days. So yes, the 6 years certainly had some pain, but it was certainly interfaced and with lots and lots of humor and joy.
That's great to hear. And you know, just something I thought of as you were speaking that I want to ask you quickly. And I haven't seen you speak, and it's been too long. It's been several months since the last time I saw you. But I remember you talking about the fact that you and the people the men that were over there with you and the amount of success that you all achieved compared to other people that had similar experiences but were not POWs, went to the war and fought and maybe came home when their tour was over.
This is, I think, the baseline probably that validates my philosophy of life, that adversity is a horrible thing to waste. The statistic is that of all the combatants of Vietnam, 30.6% have post-traumatic stress disorder, PTSD. Nearly a third of all combatants in Vietnam, of the prisoners of war, 4% of us have post-traumatic stress disorder. And the guys that have the most problems are the guys that were only there for a few weeks or a month or two. So that the guys that were there the longest essentially came back the healthiest. Why is that? How can this possibly be? I mean, if you think of post-traumatic stress disorder, who could have more stress in their life, you know, than a prisoner of war that's being tortured and beaten and diseased and lonely, and the psychologist and psychiatrist, and I believe this, is the reason that we came back as healthy as we did, mentally and physically, was because of the leadership that we had and the team that we put together. So there's some amazing stories and I think some amazing principles about teamwork, about leadership, about vision, about integrity, about knowing who you are and what the challenges you face. So yes, lots of advantages. One of the things they did when we first came home is they started a physical and mental examination every year. I go down to Pensacola, Florida, and have an exam. They began by setting up a control group of pilots, fighter pilots, who weren't prisoners of war. They weren't shot down, and they weren't captured and tortured. And so they have had so far about twice as many problems with the control group as they had with the prisoners of war. The 591 of us came home. We have produced a bunch of congressmen, 2 United States senators, a vice presidential candidate, a presidential candidate. We have a governor, 2 ambassadors, doctors, lawyers, preachers, teachers, 17 generals and 7 admirals, and most of us retired as senior grade military officers. So this is something that no group like this in history has ever done. And it sort of, I think, validates my point that when you have a challenge in your life, you can look at it a couple different ways. And, you know, you can blame somebody else for the problem, feel sorry for yourself, take on this mantle of victim, as we all do. It's almost human nature. Or you can step forward, understand the problem, take it day by day, use basic principles, and get on with your life and actually be better because of the challenge you faced.
Wow, so amazing. And Captain Plumb, I have to mention that when you're going down that list of all those successful positions that people achieved, you left out Hall of Fame speaker.
Thank you for that.
So your message to me is so fantastic because it's so motivational, yet it still combines so many practical things. And you just listed some of them: leadership, teamwork, and you talk about how you hung on to those and you use those as members of that community you were in while you were in captivity. So here's my last question for you today. And along those lines, the motivation you provide, the practical tips you provide, what are a couple things that you would want someone from our audience who's attending the summit in September to walk away with after they hear you speak?
Well, of course, this is most of these will be business people, and so they'll be searching for ideas to use in their professional lives. Although I think my message is equally important to personal lives. I think if they could walk away, first of all, thinking, I thought I had problems. Now I've listened to Captain Plumb, and my problems seem smaller. And then if they can think of, hey, in all of the noise that I'm going through, I still have a choice. I have a personal choice. I can decide to be a winner. I can decide to be a loser, and I can decide to give away my choice if I want to. And if a person can just I mean, it's a very, very simple principle. You know, I am not a rocket scientist, and I speak in very simple terms, but it really is true. I think that one of the biggest problems we face as individuals in business and in our personal lives is we forget that we still are in control. We're in control of our attitude. We're in control of our disposition. We can smile or we can frown at any given issue. And if you can finally decide that it's not the things around you that really define you, it's the choices you make about the things around you. And if you can do that, be positive, then you can literally do anything you set your mind to do.
What a truly awesome message, and one that we need reminded of often, and because we forget it. You're right, we forget it. We go into our human nature of protection mode, and we forget the control that we actually have.
That's right. And you know, if I can, my approach to every group that I've ever spoken to is, if there's one person in that audience that goes away feeling better about themselves and about the problems they face, then I've done my job.
Well, as a person who has seen you 4 times, I can assure you that it is more than one person every single time you speak. I can assure you.
Okay. Thank you for that.
You are welcome. And Captain Plumb, thank you for taking the time to join us today. It was truly an honor to have you join us. And we can't wait to have you in Cleveland for the Secret Service Summit on the 29th and 30th of September. It is going to be great. I know our audience is going to love you, as so many audiences do. And I can't wait to see you then. Hopefully I get to see you beforehand somewhere along the way, but if not, I am really looking forward to seeing you in September.
Me too, David. Look forward to it, pal.
All right, thank you, Captain Plumb.